Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sitrep podcast. I'm your host this evening, Oriskany Jim. There has been a slight change of plans. Some things have gone right, some things have gone wrong. Here on the Sitrep podcast team, everything's cool, but I'm filling in for Bill today, and we're going to go ahead and do some light hobby on the hobby desk today. So let me go ahead and turn on the camera here, and we'll get this started. Especially if I can remember where my camera is. There we go. Turn on, Mr. Camera. Alright, cool. Alright, everyone. So what we're looking at today is some light Soviet armor that we have gotten from various bargain bins. As you guys know, over the last month or so, I have been chewing away at a whole bunch of bargain bin stuff. Things that I bought for literally dimes on the dollar. Like a dollar a miniature. If you actually took time to add it up, it would probably be like 75 cents to the miniature. The trade-off is a lot of these minis are in really bad shape. Some of them have been in pretty good shape, to be perfectly honest. And I'll show you some of the good ones that I've been working on. Some of them, however, have been pretty bad. These poor BMPs, BMDs, and BRDMs that we're going to look at in a second here have really seen better days. I think some of it was kind of sold to me on the expectation that I would use it as terrain, burnt out wrecks to kind of scatter around the table ahead of the battle. But I'm actually trying to return them to service. For these BMPs, it has not been an easy road. I am not even gonna kid around on that. Okay, so let's take a look at some good news first. Everyone has probably been, following this for a little while now. I've been trying to get at least one miniature done per day ever since our little doubleheader weekend 2.5 weeks ago at Dos Creek House, home of South Florida Miniatures Gaming Club. And it's been going pretty well so far. So as of Sunday, so 3 days ago, I had completed 19 miniature rescues in 14 days. Some of these miniatures needed complete rebuilds. Some of them just needed a little bit of love and a fresh coat of paint. And a lot of them just needed, all those Soviet tanks needed all new guns. This Su-152, for some reason, had a 122 millimeter gun that belongs on a JS2 battle tank. I don't know what was going on there. That vehicle wasn't even close to historically accurate. Chopped off the gun. In hindsight, I wish I'd kept it, because there was nothing wrong with the gun's print. It was just the wrong gun, not even close. And I had to make that 152 from scratch. I had to make this pedestal mount on the striker from scratch. I had to make, you guys have probably saw last week, I had to make all those three turrets on the AAVs from scratch. A lot of scratch builds. This field gun got 2 commanders or 2 crewmen from my bits box and a base, again, all made from scratch. A lot of stuff was missing, a lot of stuff was beaten up, a lot of stuff was damaged. And we're trying to, get through this stuff. So here is the AAV. Sorry, here's the striker. Super zoom close-up. I should note these are 15 millimeter miniatures. The striker was metal. I have no idea who the manufacturer was. Again, I bought it. They had been literally in a shoebox for Lord knows how long. And some of them had a little bit of paint on them. Some of them not. So this striker, there's about 20 different versions of the striker. I decided to go with the basic command version. There was the remains of this pedestal mount on top of it. It wasn't very good. It was only half there. It was the wrong size. And what was there was badly damaged. So long story short, just ripped it clean off. And now with 2 jewelry magnets, jewelry magnet 1, jewelry magnet 2, all this done with mat board. These are all pieces of plastic broom bristle on top of some kneaded eraser and cardboard, some mat board for the frame, 3 pieces of wooden dowels for the 2 target acquisition sights, then this big scope here underneath it. I tried to give it that glassy kind of iridescent shine, like you're looking into a camera lens. Don't really know if I pulled that off. And then I did have a 50 caliber from my bits box I was able to put on there. So again, now that thing is the right size, it's the right scope. It does really look like that in real life. It kind of threw me for a loop too. I was like, what the hell is that thing supposed to be? All these grenade launchers. There are 4 quad-barreled grenade launchers set at like 35-degree angles, so that the top of that pedestal turret looks like a bouquet of badly arranged flowers. That's what the photographs and the blueprint showed. That's what I went for. And yeah, long story short, take your first shot. It's supposed to look like that. I then added some stowage, because again, this is the commander's vehicle, and especially the commander's versions of the Striker that I've seen photographs of. They are always absolutely piled up high with all kinds of stowage. The commander's got to have all of his little luxuries, I guess. So I had some stowage for my bits box. These wooden boxes are just square dowels that I cut, sanded down, painted, and dry brushed. And then these little backpacks on here are scratch built out of kneaded eraser. So I take some kneaded eraser, I cut a very, very thin strip of it, I roll it up like a sleeping bag or like a tarp or who knows what, a poncho of some kind, paint it with super glue to solidify the shape, because if you guys know what kneaded eraser is like, it doesn't really hold its shape if you don't, solidify it. And then the usual paint, wash, dry brush. I borrowed some crimps. When I say borrowed, I shamelessly stole a whole bunch of crimps. We've had some questions on this in Facebook, so I'll go ahead and answer it here as well. A whole bunch of crimps from my girlfriend's jewelry box. My girlfriend makes a lot of jewelry as part of her hobby. And so she's got like I don't even know, what is it, Jen? Put it in the comments. It's like $3 for a bag of 1,000 of these things. But I'm always going in there and stealing little handfuls, because the smallest gauge crimps that we have make great little radio jacks. So I glue that where the radio is supposed to be. Give it, again, the usual bit of paint, just so it matches the rest of the vehicle, because it comes as like a faux silver kind of a look. And then from a dustpan broom, smaller than, so these grenade launchers are from the whisk broom. And then these much, much thinner bristles come from the dustpan broom. Those form the radio antenna. Again, the commander's vehicle, I used all 3 available radio jacks, put lots of radios in there, because clearly it's a commander's vehicle. And yep, that's from last week. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been working on. So again, 19 rescues in 14 days. What I started after that is what you saw here on the hobby desk. So I'll go back to camera. Okay, so this is what I'm looking at here. I did the best I could with the pieces available. I'm not entirely sure some of these are entirely accurate, but it's good enough for a 50mm miniature. So matching up the turrets to the holes as best I could. Again, this stuff was literally all just thrown into a big shoebox kind of a thing. BMP3s. You can always tell the BMP3. The BMP is probably the easiest one to tell. Look at the turret. Look for that funky little double barrel kind of an arrangement there. I think it's a 30mm, the same 30mm automatic cannon that's on the BMP2, coupled with a 100mm, I think it's a low velocity dual purpose gun. Throws out a lot of HE frag. It's not going to penetrate any armor. In fact, I'm pretty sure the 30mm high velocity gun is going to be better at penetrating armor than that 100mm low velocity thing. But those are the 2 guns that you see on the BMP3. You also see that little bit of modular armor sort of bolted on both frontal faces of the small turret. And then I ruined a couple razor blades, shaving off the hatch that was on the vehicle. This is solid metal, by the way. And put in a hatch from my bits box, so I don't think that's the actual exact hatch that would go on here, and one of my Soviet commanders. So this is a BMP3. This saw service in the very end of the late 1980s, I believe, going into the early 1990s, right as the Soviet Union was falling apart. But you see a lot of these on both sides of the current conflict in the Ukraine. A lot of these. So that was these 3 vehicles here. Some of the gun barrels are different lengths than they should be. Like, they don't even match up if you look closely. This one's clearly longer than these 2. It is what it is at this point. Also, like where the long gun is compared to where the short gun is on different sides. Again, there's only so much you can do to try to perfect these miniatures in the state that they're in. It looks like some stuff got broken and beaten up, but that's where these guys are for now. They also got re-cleaned with a lot of razor trying to scrape off some of this metal. I think the other two are resin. And a lot of gaps have been getting filled in with, again, either green stuff or kneaded eraser. You give it a quick paint with super glue just to kind of make sure. You ruin a brush doing that, by the way, of course. And what you're just trying to do is trying to firm up and toughen up that putty or kneaded eraser, whatever it is that you're filling in. There are holes in the gaps, there are holes in the tracks, there are holes in the wheels, all kinds of bubbling, especially on the resin ones. Let me see if I can find one that shows it pretty well here. This BMP2. Yeah, this whole back fender of the BMP2 has been completely replaced with kneaded eraser. Shaped until I get it to the right shape I want. Again, painted over with that super glue, and then try to paint it a little bit to make it look like it's part of the vehicle. So those are the three BMP3s. The smaller ones are BMP2s. At least I think they are. These turrets, I'm going to be straight out, look a little small. The BMP2s that I'm familiar with, the turrets are a little bit larger, but that's okay. They also have the 30mm automatic cannon on there. 30mm automatic cannon was clearly just a wire, and you can see where someone took a pair of snips and just snipped it because the end of the barrel wasn't even square. It was that weird kind of a crimp spear point that you get when you cut very, very thick wire with a pair of kitchen scissors or shears or who knows what. I tried to clean that off myself. I ruined a pair of scissors trying to cut those down to the right shape. That didn't work. So now the new muzzle brakes are on there. Those new muzzle brakes are electrical tape, a very, very thin slice of electrical tape, a little bit of super glue on the end of it, wrapped around twice to give it that little bit of extra thickness where it looks like a 30mm automatic cannon muzzle brake. Sprue plastic, some old ditching logs, plastic ditching logs from Battlefront, and again some more electrical tape to make new AT5 spandrel anti-tank launchers that sit on top of these BMP2s. I think there were, out of these three BMP2s, I think one of them still had its AT5 pad, or its AT5 missile launcher. The other two were just broken off, who knows where, lost to the ether. So that was definitely not going to work. So I just ripped off the one that was there. It was also a little too small, and I just made new ones as best I could. Now at least they're all uniform. So I've got a platoon of those. These two platoons of BMPs, I am almost certainly going to put in, like I was showing before, Ukrainian markings. So I have been working on, this is probably going to mess up my white balance here, but forgive me. I've been making up Ukrainian army markings. Again, we're not going for any specific regiment or brigade here, and these are probably not tactically accurate, but with just this little bit of color on the side of the turret or the side of the hull, we're going to clearly show that these are Ukrainian markings. And I wanted to be careful with that because clearly if you're going to make up Ukrainian vehicles, you're putting them up against Russian vehicles. And they're all using the same vehicles, more or less. They're all using, you've seen from the footage, a lot of the same markings, a lot of the same camouflage. So it's going to be tough to actually put these things on a table and tell the two sides apart. So the markings are a little overdone intentionally. And that's even if we do it. We may wind up not even ever doing that. I might take this to the club and it might be like a little bit of a too soon factor. So we may only do it here as like a solo game. But we will have in the next, I don't know, month or so, perhaps, some Ukrainian versus Russian forces on the table in the near future. Ukrainian army idea also lends well to the nature of these miniatures. A lot of the Ukrainian stuff is ex-Soviet from before 1990, when Ukraine was no longer part of the Soviet Union, clearly. So it's at least 30 years old. It's been through hell and back. The Ukrainian military basically fell apart through lack of funding and corruption all through the 1990s and the early 2000s. And then they went straight into a full-scale war. So the status of most Ukrainian military equipment is a little beat up. So if you've got beat up miniatures, it looks okay. If some of these patches don't look right, if some of the fenders are bent, if you have a couple cracked road wheels or jaggedy looking tracks, hey, it looks like what we're seeing at places like Bakhmut right now. So that's fine. Now, so what I've done with these is prime them black, base coated them in this pale green out of a rattle can, and then the brown and black was then applied with an airbrush. I do a lot of my airbrushing with a Badger Renegade. Oh, let me get it in camera there. With a Badger Renegade. I've got two of them, in fact. They treat me pretty well, especially since they were my first airbrushes, and I treat them very badly. I didn't really know what I was doing, but they're kind of the AK-47 of airbrushes, because even a buffoon like myself, barely knowing how to take care of them, and they still perform pretty well. I tried airbrushing on live stream a couple times. It works. It's just extremely stressful. Whoa. Let me fix my camera settings here. No, focus, dude, focus. It's just kind of stressful. Because, I mean, doing a live stream is, there's no second takes when you're live, number one. And number two, airbrushes tend to be very, very finicky. And the Murphy's Law of Averages just means something's going to go wrong live on camera. Okay, so that leaves, so I put the base camouflage, 3-color camouflage, black, really dark gray, but black, medium brown, and like a pale light, like Soviet green on there. That's all done. Same with these guys here. The difference is these 6 vehicles have so far gotten the Oriskany Pinwash. And I say the Oriskany Pinwash specifically because, man, I love to pinwash the beep out of my vehicles. I will pinwash a vehicle until it looks like it belongs in a comic book. Almost all my miniatures are 15 mil. They're very, very, they're relatively small in scale, at least compared to people who are used to either 20 or 28s. And again, these vehicles, especially the resin ones, I don't know if they were overpainted. I don't think so, because I'm not finding a lot of extra paint underneath the base, but they maybe were just bad prints or something. The details are very rounded off. These are not very crisp miniatures even before they got beaten up and damaged. So a lot of these details I've had to redraw, so to speak, onto the miniature via some pinwashing. So pinwashed, not pinwashed. Clearly you can kind of see the difference there between the pinwashed model and especially if I get it in focus, between the pinwashed vehicle and the not pinwashed vehicle. There we go. So hopefully now you can tell a little bit better the difference between something that's been pinwashed and something you can't see most of the details on that. And this one's actually in pretty good shape. This is the metal miniature. The metal miniatures are actually pretty good. Alright, so for today's stream, I was thinking we could either pinwash these last 3 vehicles, or we could start doing something else like Commanders. Pinwashing is extremely laborious, very boring, very time consuming. It probably wouldn't make the most fun stream. So unless we see a lot of comments in chat to go finish up the pinwashing. Also, I'm kind of sick of pinwashing. Yes, I do know that last week I said I love pinwashing. It's like my most relaxing kind of a thing. Most of my artwork that I do in either a hobby or a non-hobby stuff is pencil drawings, stuff like that. Pinwashing is very much like drawing as opposed to painting. So that tends to be my little safe space. Nevertheless, dude, I've been pinwashing for like 2 days now, and getting a little tired of it. So we got 3 Commanders here. I thought maybe we could paint some Commanders. Meanwhile, I'll catch up with Mr. Chat. So, John is working on some German camouflage pattern for World War II. There's some grumbling from the table, Jen says, when Jim does camouflage. Only when I do, I only get really upset for, also I work in 15 mil, I think John's working in 20. The only time camouflage gets kind of annoying for me is when I am trying to do chocolate chip. Now clearly this chocolate chip is heroically proportioned, but on a 15 millimeter miniature from 2 feet away, you totally get the point. That's probably the most crazy I get when it comes to camouflage. I do have some 20s, but I'll be honest with you guys, I just get the colors that I want in the camouflage screen, and I just kind of splatter it on there. Complex camouflage schemes have never been a big deal for me. It's never bothered me. Again, maybe it's because I'm more of a drawer than a painter. Jen says, all hail the Bits box. That's right. Pour that first shot. Oh, pour, P-O-U-R. I got you, Jen. Is it time to make the coffee an Irish coffee? Not yet. Let me use up my, let me get the stream done before I start getting crazy here. John says, honest marks, use AFVs. Yeah, so, yeah, mostly, in fact, all of these are coming from my friend Mark at the local club. And he's just trying to clean out his closet, because he's got other stuff going on. I get the feeling he was going to dip his toe into moderns and then kind of said, how the hell with this? Because he's doubling down on World War II stuff as we speak. I think he's painting some very late war German SS stuff. He's getting ready for a Spring Awakening, a Battle of Lake Balaton, Hungary, March in 45. I think he's working on some stuff there. So he's not giving up on miniatures. He just bought a whole new set of miniatures, but he's got to make room, and so he's been selling me this stuff at like ridiculously cheap prices. So if it sounds like I'm complaining about the condition of the miniatures, I promise I'm not complaining about it. I'm just trying to demonstrate like why they look like. I wish the miniatures looked a little bit better than they do. They look fine for 15 mil, especially again beaten up Ukrainian and Soviet stuff or old Russian stuff. And to kind of prove the point, I hope to in the next week or two to get started on some new miniatures that are not from the pound. These are right off the press. So I got some Command Decision 15 millimeters from, or I should say, yeah, Command Decision is the manufacturer. The place I bought them from was Old Glory. Some I do all my stuff in 15 mil mostly, but some 15 mil M48s. So yeah, M48 A2. So this is going to have the old 90 millimeter T-bar muzzle brake gun on there. You can see one of them right there, maybe a little bit. I've already got 3 of those. They are not really handy right now, so I won't bring them out. Painted as Magak 2s that the IDF would have used in the 1967 conflict, specifically the Sinai half of the war, or the Sinai 4/5 of the war. Places like Abu Aguila, Katif, especially through Khan Yunis, Rafah, the Gaza Strip, and then they make that big left turn and they start heading west down the Mediterranean coast, the El Jaradi Road towards Al Arish. So I've got those built. I've had them for years, in fact. I know these are really good kits. They're a little expensive. A bag of 3 is $30. So, yeah. The thing that's not cool, though, is that it's coming with that 90 millimeter gun. Because I've already got a platoon of those, and now I've bought 6 more. So, oh, that's not them. Where's my other 6 tanks? Or my other 3 tanks? So I've got 6 of these. I'm going to paint 1 more in its original configuration. I'm going to add it to my platoon of 3 Magak 2s, and I'm going to have a platoon of 4 Magak 2s. That'll allow me plenty of tanks to pretty much do any 7 days to the River Rhine action in 1967 6 days war, at least for tanks. But I'm not really into the 1967 war because it's boring. It really kind of is. If you're into Arab-Israeli wars, the the thick vein, the money pot, where you want to go if you're really interested in Air-Israeli wargaming is Yom Kippur 1973. The problem is by that time the Israelis had upgraded their fleet of M48A2s to M48A5s, or what they called the Magach 3, with the 100mm gun. You guys probably saw some streams about a couple months ago where I had some 3D printed Magach 3s. Damn, those things are terrible. I mean, they're even worse than these guys. They're really bad. I tried to salvage the guns as best I could. The guns started to break, like the main guns. Even when I tried to shave them down and clean them up, they turned into just absolute dog shit. So, basically taught myself how to make my own 105mm guns. So like I said, these 125s and all my Ukrainian tanks are scratch built, because these guns just either didn't exist or were broken or were bent or were just screwed up. So I just ripped them all off and I built my own 125s from scratch. I had also previously taught myself to build scratch 105s. So now the question was, why the hell did I buy those 3D things when I could have just bought more of these and replaced the 90mm with the 105s? Then comes the really goofy part. Digging through my bits box, I found out that I already had the required manufactured 105s from my old Battlefront M1s. Because when you buy this kit, the M1 platoon for Battlefront, again, most people don't paint it this way. They paint it in the whole Team Yankee kind of a 4-color NATO scheme. I painted mine for Historical Desert Storm. They give you 2 guns in the bag. You can build the M1, the M1 IP, or the M1A1 with the 120mm gun. Well, clearly I built the 120mm gun, and I put the 105s in a bag and forgot about them. So even when I was trying to save those disastrous 3D prints, I already had manufactured 105s in the bits box I had completely forgotten about. Meanwhile, I built new ones out of the inside of mechanical pencils and toothpicks. The good news is I taught myself how to make my own guns, and thus I was able to save this Ukrainian fleet. So I guess it all worked out in the end, but damn, dude, I feel kind of embarrassed, and there was a lot of extra work. Long story short, take your second shot. I'm going to take the other 5 M48s here and replace the 90s with 105s, make my Magach 3s, and now I'm ready for 1973 combat as well, especially after I build these 9 3-packs of 3 M113s. M113s is a long absent force from my table that I haven't had like forever. I don't know why. Oop, that's the wrong one. There we go. 3 bags of M113s. So I got 3 bags of 3. Command Decision sells everything in bags of 3. I'm going to take 4 of these, paint them in US 1960s markings, add them to my Vietnam force, and then I'm going to take the other 5, paint them in desert, and they're going to go with my my M48A5 / Magach 3s. That's going to be the basis of my IDF 1973 force. So I know you guys are probably getting tired of hearing about me rescuing these puppies from the pound. We're getting near the end of it. And again, hopefully next week I'll be chewing on some new miniatures. I'll probably do some cleans, and once I get a couple of them cleaned, maybe we'll do a couple builds on next week's stream, where I'll do a build video or something like that. Because no one wants to watch a video of me, cleaning a miniature. That's like really boring. But I'll clean them ahead of time, and maybe we can do the build. Alright, so let's do some commanders. I'll also check out Mr. Chat. We got a bunch of people in the chat, but only 2 people are commenting. Guys, what's up with that action, man? If you're in the chat and you're watching us, thanks very much for coming by. Throw a comment in chat so we know you're here. The camo looks perfect. I don't know if it's accurate, but they all match. Yeah, you kind of have to do it all at once. So if you do it all at once, you're guaranteed that match. Notice this. This was done at a different time. This was done like 2 weeks ago. No, like a week and a half ago. there is a slight mismatch. Maybe when I dry brush these APCs very, very lightly, it'll come out closer to this, but it's okay if it doesn't match perfectly. Oh, looks good. Just able to join. Oh, hey, Mark, how you doing? Mark, we're looking at more of your refugees. So we were looking at the we were looking at the Striker before. That got done along with the rest of the LAVs, and I'm switching over to this light Soviet armor. So BMP3s, BMP2s, 2 BMDs. These are airborne or air mobile versions of, they're not really the versions of, but they're air mobile variants. Again, they're not variants. They're air mobile APCs, is a short version. And then there's one wheeled BRDM2 with anti-tank launcher on there. So what this thing does in real life, this one doesn't, but in real life, get back in there. This little thing depresses until it closes up. This allows the crew to do their missile drill from under armor, and then when they're ready to deploy, they have targets acquired. This thing pops back up, it swivels around, and it can engage. Oop, my big hand's in the way. It can engage tanks with these missiles. AT5s, I believe. AT4s or AT5s. Alright, so these guys have the dark wash, these guys have the dark wash, these guys don't. We're going to take a pause from the dark wash, we're going to work on some of the commanders. The army is growing, that's right. I like the BRDM ATGM 3 vehicle. I think it's the 8. Oh, okay. Oh, they are Saggers on there? The AT3s? They look like Saggers. I thought those carried either 4s or 5s in real life. But yeah, those fins look kind of big to be 4s or 5s. Who knows? The army is growing, says, ooh, I'm not even really on camera here. Alright, let me make sure I'm on the best possible focus. Alright, so I've been putting a lot of my Soviet tank commanders in Soviet Tank Commander Black, which, again, I usually use a very dark gray. That way the wash can catch recesses and shadows. If you make it black, it won't work. You're putting black on black and you can't see anything. But to be honest, if I'm going to put these BMPs in Ukrainian markings, also Soviet tank commanders don't really wear black anymore. They wear a camouflage, or at the very least a dark kind of a green. World War II, Soviets, and most of the Cold War period the same way. They would stick with that black. Same with the Germans. Germans always wore black. The idea was it would the black would hide oil stains. And the crew wouldn't always look like a bunch of vagabonds. And I think they gave up the ghost on that. Because from what I can see on Google Images, they're using a lot more green, and also green with camouflage. We're going to try some camouflage on these guys. Because again, the BMP2s and 3s I'm probably going to put in Ukrainian markings. The BMDs I'm going to leave in Russian markings. And the the BRDM I'm also going to leave in Russian markings. That way I can use them in like Team Yankee type scenarios. So I'm hoping that comes out a little bit. Notice the green is a little bit different than the green on the vehicle. A lot of Russian uniforms are a dark and kind of highly saturated green. And again, technically these are probably going to be Ukrainian tank commanders anyway. Russian tank commanders now also wear a more modern tank helmet. That's a little more akin to the CVC that American tank crews have been wearing for God knows how long. However, I don't have those commanders available, so these guys are still wearing the weird science bras that you put on your head. That's what I call them. Russian tank commander helmets from World War II forward, it always looks like they're wearing a big bra on their head. Prove me wrong. And as far as weird science goes and wearing a bra on your head, if you didn't get that reference, that is your problem, my friend. I have a feeling most of the people in this audience, however, would get that reference. We're all old enough. That was my girl, Kelly LeBrock, back in 1984? 85? Good God almighty. And again, this vehicle doesn't have its pin wash on it yet, but we're going to go ahead and do the commander. Oh wow, we got a bunch of people here now. The army is growing. Yeah, like I was saying, I think right before you joined, Mark, I'm going to do some of these in Ukrainian markings, some of these in Russian markings. The ones in Ukrainian markings are going to pair up with my oddball assortment of Cold War era Soviet armor, mostly T-64s, then this one T-72, and these are going to be the beginnings of a the beginnings of a Ukrainian force that we can then put up against a Russian force if people at the club ever are comfortable with that. I realize not everyone might be comfortable with that, so I mean we'll be sensitive to what people want to do. If not, I'll just do it solo here at the house. But yeah, I feel like properly handled, doing some current day Ukrainian versus Russian 7 days to the River Rhine would not go amiss if handled correctly, because that's some serious shit. You have to do that stuff right. Madman says they all look ready for Team Yankee, lined up side by side. Yeah, I got my Team Yankee parking lots ready to go. So I hope you guys have checked out our recent Sword Point game on our YouTube channel that you're on right now. Parts 1 and 2 are now up. That was a 48 square foot table that only had 11 tanks on it. So one thing I love about 7 Days to the River Rhine is it keeps the forces small, and you don't wind up with those tank parking lots. So 48 square feet is, clearly 8 by 6, and with only with only 11 tanks, and then there was like 10 or 12 APCs, a bunch of Humvees, an Avenger, anti-aircraft vehicle, a bunch of other stuff as well. But with that much space, yeah, like I said in the beginning of that video, don't expect to see a big Team Yankee parking lot on this table. Yeah, because that always gets on my nerves. And again, I don't think that's really a problem with the game design. I think this might be a bit of a hot take. I think that's a problem with the community. Because everyone who plays Team Yankee is like, oh, I gotta have a whole big fleet of tanks. When most armies aren't really like that. One thing I like about 7 Days to the River Rhine is it enforces the idea that a tank without infantry support becomes very ineffective. And if your infantry is not within a certain radius of a certain tank unit, when enemy infantry is close by, you start taking penalties. Your movement rate reduces to half. +1 on your difficulty to hit. half of your spotting range. All kinds of bad things start to happen. Because your tank crew knows it's alone and knows that it's a giant turtle about to walk into an ant pile. So without friendly infantry, your loader, your driver, they start looking everywhere else for the next asshole with an RPG to pop out of the bushes somewhere, and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, i.e. what you're ordering them to do. So you start taking penalties across the board. The Old Glory stuff looks good, says John Sauerby. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be nice to work on some new miniatures. So I got, because some people weren't there, so I'll go through this super fast. I got some M48s and some M113s. I'm going to reinforce my American 50mm infantry force, my Israeli 1967 tank force, and really kick off my Israeli 1973 tank force with some Magok 3s. I will have to build my own 105mm guns, or I can use something out of my bits box. I'll have to replace the 90s that came with those guns, or that came with those tanks. The Dodos 1057 says, I like the BMP but dislike communists. Yeah, well, the good news is the BMP is now being used. The BMP is one of those vehicles that is, it's a lunchbox on tracks. It's one of the worst AFVs. I mean, if I had to pick, like, the worst vehicle, if I ever had to go into combat in an armored vehicle, like, the worst one would probably be a BMP. I'd say 50% of the vehicles that we've seen burnt out on the side of the road in Ukraine since last February have probably been some variant of the BMP. I mean, these things are just terrible. They're relatively fast, and they carry infantry, and they have some fire support. Notice that most of the actual vehicles in the field no longer carry the anti-tank missiles because the friggin' things don't work half the time. They just rely on the guns and, of course, whatever anti-tank weapons the infantry are using. Their armor is a joke. The part of the fuel storage is in the infantry bay doors on the back of the vehicle. These things are ass. But there are a lot of them. And they do have a very sharp, kind of a cool shape to them. So, yeah, I do get why people like them. I'm going to build a fleet of them. I've already got 10 from Battlefront, BMP 1s and 2s. And now I'm building another fleet of like another 6 for more Russians and also some Ukrainians. So it's a vehicle that you need if you want to do anything post-1970. It's a force that you need. And again, some of them are now in use with the Ukrainian military, so they're not all communist vehicles anymore. John says, Madman, hush now. This is a Team Yankee free zone right now. I don't have any problem with Team... Again, I think a lot of times when a game gets a bad reputation for a couple things, it's usually, I found, not the game. It's the community. I know that's probably even worse. But I'm sorry, but it's probably true. It's the lists that people build that kind of give the game that reputation. Bolt Action is a great little game when used the way it was originally designed. It was supposed to be, I'm looking for some paint now, some flesh paint. It was designed as an infantry game. It only gets silly when people start bringing in, King Tigers and, 25 pounders in the direct fire mode on a, 28mm table that's 4x6. You know that gun fires like 700 feet at this scale, right? That gun should be nowhere near the table. Well, I bought the miniature and I painted it. And I paid money for it, so I want to use it. I'm like, all right, whatever. We did this is forever ago. 2015, when I was still writing for what was then Beasts of War. I collaborated with a guy in the UK on a project we called the Worldwide D-Day Challenge. So all around the world we had 27 games, something like 50 or 60 players in 9 different countries. And for the June anniversary of D-Day, we ran all simultaneously different games that were sort of different parts of the original D-Day landing. This is for the 71st anniversary, so 2015. I had a little Omaha Beach section, and it was all kinds of different systems. And we even had Pegasus Bridge. And the games affected each other. So when the Germans held Pegasus Bridge in our campaign replay, and when the Germans also held Horsa Bridge, remember, it wasn't just about Pegasus Bridge. There was also Horsa Bridge 400 meters further to the east. 21st Panzer was able to mobilize a lot better against the left flank of 3rd UK Infantry Division coming ashore at Sword. Suffice it to say, I think I got about 2 hours of sleep in about 72 hours, because we were just constantly updating this campaign map, constantly gathering results. It was a follow the sun kind of thing. We had gamers in everywhere from Australia, China, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, UK, Ireland, Canada, all over the US. We had one game in Puerto Rico somewhere. And the reason I bring all that up is we had a lot of bolt action players. And it was bolt action done right. You know, it was like these little infantry paratrooper skirmishes, both for the British and for the Americans. 6th Airborne, 82nd Airborne, 101st Airborne. So I don't know if it's always the game system. Because, yeah, some of these games have weird reputations for, you know, certain things. Team Yankee has the tank parking lot. Bolt action is, you know, people who don't know what range is or scale. And I'm like, well, infantry shootouts are a lot closer range than a lot of people think. And tank engagements are definitely a lot longer than most people think, even in World War II. So I'm putting some flesh on this first commander's face. Both of his hands are well hidden by the hatch, so I won't even worry about that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there's a lot of different games out there. Not every game is going to fit every battle perfectly. Even my favorite, Panzerleader. I tried to do the long-range desert group air raid on the Italian airfield at Derna in Panzerleader. And it worked. It just wasn't very fun. Same thing with Panzerleader to do Tarawa, November 1943, in the Pacific. We got it where it would work, it just wasn't a whole lot of fun. So certain games, I feel, work better in certain scenarios. And I think a lot of what makes a game bad is the community. Oops, I got way too much paint on that. Like Team Yankee, everybody wants tons of tanks. The game, I don't think requires you to get much infantry. Games that I enjoy, like Battle Group and 7 Days to the River Rhine, demand that there are rules in the lists. You have to have a certain amount of infantry, or, you know, I should say 7 Days to the River Rhine doesn't demand it, but you're going to play an all-tank army in 7 Days to the River Rhine exactly once. And as you pick up your teeth off the table because you just got the ever-living shit kicked out of you, because your army just got annihilated by an infantry balanced force, you're going to say, oh, I should probably put some infantry on my list for next time. Because the games actually, you know, if not enforce, at least reward real life tactics, and that definitely includes list building. What else we got going on here? Is 7 days any different Okay, yeah, so I may have answered this question by accident several times now, Madman. I definitely like 7 Days to the River Rhine better than Team Yankee, yes. The average 7 Days to the River Rhine game has maybe 5 to 10 armored vehicles per side, as opposed to Team Yankee, which has 5 to 10 armored vehicles per square foot of table. And then it also has certain rules that say your tanks, I won't go into it again because we kind of just covered it, but friendly tanks that are not within a certain distance of friendly infantry, when enemy infantry is within a certain distance, start taking all kinds of bad penalties. And you learn very quickly never to let your tanks get too far ahead of your infantry. And that right there breaks up some of the tank parking lot idea. I think also Team Yankee has some rules that sort of reward keeping your tanks close together, especially on the Warsaw Pact side. Like tanks have to be within a certain inch of each other for them to use certain unit-based orders. 7 Days to the River Rhine also has that, but the diameter is much wider. So you can avoid those parking lots. Enemy commanders cannot, hop from one tank to another when a tank gets hit, like they can in some other games. So, actually, I'm sure that if you're playing 7 Days to the River Rhine, Madman, with the wrong group, and they just want to build a huge force of 50 T-80s and just line them up on the system will support that, and you'll wind up with tank parking lots. But I've so far found they are much less common. There's no reason to have them. There's not as many tanks on the table. And in fact, you get punished a little bit for having them in 7 days. Okay, so Mark says, I converted to the 5s. The first ATGM was a Sager 73. Yeah, I know about the AT3 Sager. I'm talking about these missiles here. These were never AT3s. Because number one, they weren't BMP1s. BMP1s carry the AT3. That's it there on the top of that gun. It's not even in a tube, it's just kind of sitting on top of the main gun on a little launch rail. Then comes the BMP2 30mm autocannon. I'm pretty sure it had an AT5 or 4. So that's what I kind of try to approximate with these, because some of them were broken off and they weren't in great shape. I didn't mess with these. These fins look kind of big to be an AT4 or 5, but I don't know. I always thought the BRDM2 carried the AT4 or 5, but I could be wrong. The black is very slimming. Everyone should wear black. Oh, for the tank commanders, right? John says, note I learned today, British tank crews in World War I also wore black coveralls. In World War I, John, are you sure that was black canvas or black material in their uniforms, or just all the oil and smoke and soot and those World War I tanks, man, those were rough. I would not want to serve as a tank crewman. I would almost rather serve in a BMP than serve in a World War I tank. Those things were, jeez. I'm okay with that. I have T-55s, PT-76s, and BTR-50s. Oh, okay. A lot of early stuff. I have a huge fleet of T-55s. They're all in desert markings, though. So that's what I'm going to put up against my Israelis. Didn't know if this was a good time to mention this. I saw some Old Glory M113s I can't use. How's the Mountain doing? Well, yeah, I just bought 9 M113s from Old Glory. No worries. The Mountain is down. Market's down a lot. It almost all fits in one box now. So like I said, we had 19 rescues in 14 days. This is like 3 days ago. Before that, there was at least another 10 or 12 miniatures I had painted that you either sold or gifted to me. So we were at least 30, probably more like 35, maybe even pushing 40. And now we're doing these 9 more. All right, so we got the dark green. Oop, a little bit too much there. We got the dark green. Coveralls. Hopefully I didn't just overstep. That's pretty good. All right, while we're waiting for that to dry, because the next thing that goes on their flesh is a little bit of wash, I will start with some of this camouflage I've seen lately. So I'm just going to play around with a little bit of light brown striping. Nothing very serious. Ooh, my paint kind of dried. That's what happens when you talk too much. So none of this on the tanker's helmet, but just the shoulders and back of the... take the turret out of there. Of course, you probably can't see that. Come on, focus. We're just a hint, just to give the eye the idea of what you're looking at from 2 feet across the table. That bit there on his collar is definitely overdone. I'm going to tamp that down in just a second. But the rest of it is kind of what I'm looking for. Jen says, no, Mark, just no more mountain for Jim. No, man, it's all good. Oh, I'm gonna get this on camera here. Very thin stripes. Don't get any on the missile. Or the hatch. Alright, now for the places that I overstepped, I'm going to go back over it, a little bit of this green, the same green I saved. So John's probably laughing at me now because the camouflage he sounded like he was working on is way tougher than this. This is pretty easy. I am working on a smaller scale, but yeah, what he's working on is a lot tougher than what I'm trying here. I keep overstepping and then counter overstepping. Alright. Now, just for fun, Ooh, except these guys are not going to be... Alright, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I was about to put red shoulder boards on these guys. Let me not do that. Some teal green. Or actually, it's more of a bluish green. I have no idea. In fact, I'm almost positive this is not the right color. But I'm going to put it on there anyway. It'll get the point across that these are not Russian tankers. Just a little bit of blue. You probably can't even see that. Little bit of blue insignia, or not, like shoulder insignia, just to kind of show that this is not a Russian tank crewman. I got some paint on my thumb there. All right. Because again, these guys are probably going to wind up, at least the BMPs. Whoa. In Ukrainian markings. If I can ever print these things small enough to where they'll actually fit on the vehicles. I'm having a little bit of a problem with that lately. Madman says you hate BMPs but you buy them. You should apply a purchasing director of the Republic of Albania. Yeah, it's like Shermans. I mean, Shermans are terrible. T-34s aren't great. But if you're going to have the Army required, again, I don't go by the rule of cool. I just don't. I'm much more a, what was really there for a given force. And they're not the best vehicles, man, and BMPs are just what was there, what is there. BMPs have served in combat in every single continent in the world except, I guess, Australia and Antarctica. God knows they've been all over the place in Asia, Africa, and Europe. They have fought in North America. They have fought in some wars in Central America, which is technically part of North America. Nicaragua used to have them. They are just a ubiquitous vehicle. How long have we been up? What time is it? 8:06. Okay, a little bit more than an hour. I always feel like these streams go on too long. The BMP was designed by a very Soviet style of assault, I think. Huge, overwhelming assault with the attack is supported by overwhelming artillery, possible chemical attack, and armored support. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of them. And they definitely emphasize fire support for the infantry. From that 76mm gun you see on the BMP-1 to the 30mm autocannon you see on the BMP-2. To the stuff they're rocking around on the BMP-3 with the 100mm dual-purpose gun that sits coaxially with the 30mm autocannon. Damn it! That was a huge overstep. Alright, one more fix. There we go. Now those aqua blue or teal blue kind of shoulder boards. I realized the focus was way off on that, but I have to be able to see what I'm doing. So that's kind of what I'm going for there. After that, we're going to wash this so that some of those bright colors are going to get tamped down quite a bit. And we're also going to reestablish and darken up that all the details in that tanker's helmet. Especially those 3 big grooves over the skull there. Give it that classic Soviet era tank commander look. And also some wash on the poor guy's face. Give him some facial detail. Okay, was that all 3 of them done already? Hell no. Alright, here comes the 3rd one. Jen, you can never, Mark says to Jen, you can never really have too many M113s. This is true. The M113 is like the American BMP, except the M113 was good. My benchmark for that, before any M113 haters start barking at me, the versions. Sweet Mary of God, look at all the versions of the M113 that have come out. People love the M113. It's an APC that does what an APC is supposed to do. Carry infantry under some kind of fire, armor, not the best, and provide a degree of fire support once they get there. I promise, you guys are not going to get me on my M2 Bradley soapbox, so don't try. But that's what the M113 was really good at. Yeah, that's another vehicle that, good grief. The number of countries that have used that, the wars I think it's fought in, it's everywhere. It's a very useful little vehicle. Never got my head around Panzerleader Panzerbutz. Didn't like the 1 unit equals a platoon, just a bug in my head. Yeah, if you don't like, which I get, you know, it's no worries. It is a radically different kind of game. It's not just, oh, this is a vehicle, not a platoon. Oh, this is a platoon, not a vehicle. It is a radically, this is why, like the very first article series I published for Beasts of War was called The 4 Levels of Wargaming. This is way back in 2014, so good grief, almost 10 years ago. And the reason, we all know the basic levels of military command: tactical, operational, strategic. Where does the 4th one come from? Well, again, it's about the 4 levels of war gaming. And it's what I call either scale tactical, command, I usually say command tactical, or unit tactical, or whatever like that. Is exactly what Madman's talking about. It's not, this is a BMP3. This is where it is on the table. Its gun is pointing this way, and can you hit it? And then if you can hit it, can you penetrate its armor? And so on. That's not what command tactical gaming is about at all. At all. There is never a roll to hit in tactical gaming. You never roll to hit anything. It's this unit is going to apply fire against that unit over our range for T amount of time, this attack versus that defense, and it's going to form like a data cube of possible results based on, there's never a roll to hit because the roll to hit has already been assumed. If you have 10 men in a rifle squad, you're always going to hit 8 times out of 10. Always. There's no randomness to it. Because even if one guy misses that didn't miss last time, another guy that missed last time is going to hit this time. That average is always going to be there. So it's an applied volume of fire over a given range against certain armor, against certain terrain for a certain amount of time, and then within that there is almost a cube of possible data results. It gets resolved by the dice, modified by some DRMs, and that's where you wind up at. It's a lot less random. It's a lot less shooty. It's definitely my preferred way of gaming. I don't really prefer WYSIWYG one-to-one games. War is not a first-person shooter. It's a application of force as executed by units, and not one gun and one man trying to shoot at one man with one gun. It's almost never like that. But yeah, if you're used to Type A gaming, Type B is going to be a big change. And if it's not your thing, I totally get it. Where it really gets weird is when you get into operational gaming. And the number of times people have told me they're into operational gaming and then they show me a command tactical game. I'm like, no, that's not operational gaming. Operational gaming is definitely a change. It's a lot less about combat, and it's about what you do between the combat. I used to be a big operational strategic guy. I kind of fell out of it. Once in a while I try it now. I don't really like it anymore. I definitely like level 1, like WYSIWYG, point and shoot tactical games, or what I call skirmish games. Some people bristle when I call them that. I'm not trying to talk down about your game or anything like that. Especially in modern or World War II, anytime you've got one vehicle equals one vehicle, that's a skirmish game. To be perfectly honest. A little bit of splash there. Alrighty. Alright, what else we got going on here? Thank you for the opinion on 7 days. Now, 7 days does have some problems. 7 days is very simple. In some places, a little too simple, a little too abstracted. The good news about 7 days, it's a brand new game. It's got a very active community on Facebook, and people are constantly adding to it. So when your game is very mellow on detail, and everything is presented very, very straightforward and kind of chunky, it allows you to add new rules to it without blowing up the game. So people are doing that in huge droves. Like 7 Days to the River Rhine, by its very name, you can kind of tell it's doing the invasion of Germany in 1980 that never happened, blah, blah, blah. People will take it and they're already sort of field stripping it and putting it back together to do 1973 Yom Kippur. I've used it for Sword Point, basically Desert Storm, except just different enemies. So I mean, I've got other ideas for it. I want to use it in Vietnam. I want to use it in, like I said, 1973 Yom Kippur. I want to use it all over the place. And for that, you're going to need new lists and new rules. I want to use it in 2022 Ukraine versus Russia. All right, so we're going to come up with something like, the anti-tank missiles have an H-class firepower. We talked about this in our Sword Point game. With a high explosive weapon, hits a tank that has some kind of special armor. This is the part of the game where it really starts to generalize. Reactive armor, laminate armor, Chombum armor, it's all special armor. And the special bonus it gives you is that the enemy has to roll his penetration roll twice and use the worst result. Okay, now if you want, you can start to add additional rules, like for reactive armor, you get that bonus once, and only once. because now you've blown all the reactive armor off the tank. Now you have to, shoot against regular armor. Or, like talking about 2022 Russians versus Ukraine, the Javelin anti-tank missile, how are you going to do that? Well, the Javelin anti-tank missile is going to ignore that rule because it always comes straight down through the roof of the tank. Maybe you can defeat special armor that way. Or it always defeats the rear. Another thing I don't really like about 7 Days to the River Rhine, and again, this is something that people are adding, this is simultaneously one thing I love about 7 Days to the River Rhine and one thing I don't like about 7 Days to the River Rhine. So 7 Days to the River Rhine, one of the things that people hate about Team Yankee is the armor system. Here's your tank from the overhead. Anything forward of that line is considered frontal armor. Everything else is flank, and there's no such thing as rear armor. The armor facing system in Team Yankee, and by extension Flames of War, is very simple. What 7 Days does is it uses the battle group system from Iron Fist Publishing. You bisect the tank from corner to corner, and now only that is your frontal armor. You got these huge wide flanks, and then it gives you the arc for rear armor and no number for it. Every tank, every vehicle in 7 Days to the River Rhine only has 2 armor numbers, one for the front, one for the flanks. It tells you how to calculate rear armor, then doesn't give you a number for it. So some people are saying, look, whatever the flank armor is, subtract 2 from that, or something like, and that way you wind up with a rear flank. 7 Days is also very points driven, which I always have a problem with, especially when you can't get the points balance right, which I don't think they have. So I can be a fan of a game and not a fanboy. My all-time favorite, I often joke I'm going to be buried with a box of Panzerleader in my casket with me. I could talk shit about Panzerleader for 2 hours without a script. I can rip that game apart 6 ways from Sunday, because that game has got a lot of problems. It's one of my favorite games ever. It's got some issues. 7 Days to the River Rhine, I do recommend it. It's pretty cheap, very quick to learn. It's great, especially if you're trying to get new players, because again, it is very simple. In some places, it's a little too simple, but that turns out to be a good thing, because what people are doing is adding to it. Oh, hello, Blair. Thanks for coming out. Hello, Walkabout Games. Thanks for very much. Played 7 Days with Jim, says John Sauerby. It is very much up my alley, gaming-wise. There's a sense of friction in the game that appeals to me. The activation sequence, yes. This is what I love about games like Battle Group, Force on Force, and 7 Days to the River Rhine. They're not really what guys at the club are used to, and so I understand why there's a little bit of resistance there, and there is a little bit of resistance there. But it's not, oh, this tank has line of sight of that tank. I order that tank to shoot, and then we see if it hits. Homeboy, war does not work that way. You have to assume this guy heard you. You have to assume this guy knows what you're talking about. You have to assume this guy can spot that guy. Just because you can see this guy on the table does not mean he can see him from that little mail slot he's looking through inside that turret. With a 12-cylinder engine going off in his ear, battle smoke, and his wounded driver screaming bloody murder in the intercom, and his commander yelling at him, and artillery landing all over the place. There's no, war is not a first-person shooter. There's going to be command, there's going to be activations, there's going to be observation checks, there's going to be counter reactions. I enjoy games that take some of the detail over, okay, this 30mm automatic cannon is going to fire 6 rounds. They're APCs, or armor-piercing C rounds, ACR rounds, or whatever. They're going to fly at a deflection of 17 degrees. They're going to hit him at 34 degrees on the left, glacis of his armor here, where he's got 17 millimeters of face-hardened plate. Okay, that's all great, but who cares? I'm a little more, I don't know. This might also harken back to what I like about unit-based games. So again, I think it's a little more about what kind of games you're used to and what kind of games you like, and the choices that different games make. Like, certain games put a lot of their detail on metal versus metal. Some of them put men versus men. I tend to go with men versus men. But who knows? You know, there's different stuff. So Mark says, no Season 2 miniatures rescue in the works. Yeah, there could be. You asked before about the status of the mountain. The mountain's still here, but this is all that's left. There's the gun trucks for 15 mil Vietnam are still in there. The Shermans are still in there. Those new Pattons are in there. I don't mind these Pattons, but they're too small. When you put them up against the Pattons I have already, they're like 5%, 10% too small. I mean, I'll still use them. And some other stuff. And of course, all these wrecked helicopters are still in there. These wrecked helicopters, I am not going to try to rescue. I did glue the wings back on the hind here, but if these, I'm not going to try and put these back together to flight status. I mean, they're going to be crash birds for terrain. They're going to be crash birds for terrain. Stuff like this, I will try to fix. I'll try to come up with a fourth replacement for that little orange light that popped off. And yeah, I'll restore these gun trucks for sure. So we'll come back to it for sure. But I do want to get all that Old Glory stuff built because that is key to my plans for running 7 days to the River Rhine in 1973. We'll call it 7 days to the Suez Canal instead of the River Rhine. Damn, there's just no way I'm painting shoulder boards on any of my guys. Dude, I painted... Let me find the miniature here. Blow the dust off. This is in 15 mil. It's an American armor. On the guy's shoulder there, you can see his... If I can get the focus to work. His armored division insignia. I did not paint the number in there. There is a limit to the madness. And then to designate an officer, he has like a little white dot on his collar. So he's either a captain, a first lieutenant, or a lieutenant colonel. Probably not a lieutenant colonel. But yeah. And that's in 15. It's pretty much just 3 dots in a triangle. I don't actually paint a blue, yellow, and red triangle. 3 dots in a triangle pattern gives you the idea, especially at 18 to 24 inches away. Blair says, looking good. Thanks very much, sir. John says, I like the take from the Chieftain. Oh, a different YouTube channel. Sherman's a good tank because it was easily transportable. It had combat availability that reached 90%. Yeah, this is where you get into level 2 gaming, level 1 gaming. Or command tactical versus skirmish tactical. Is the Sherman a good tank? No. In a one-on-one versus a Panther or a Tiger or anything like that. Is it a good tank for the United States Army in 1942, 3, and 4? Yes. Because we have 15,000 of these things and they always work. The Box of Doom, the M113, they are so awesome, especially when they are painted white and you wear blue hats, LOL. Okay, well, these guys are going to be in 2 different colors. Some for in olive drab green for the U.S. Army in Vietnam, and some in desert sand for the Sinai campaign, IDF 1973 Yom Kippur. So I got 3 bags of 3, that's 9. I'll do that 4 and 5. Split them up that way. I settled on 7 armor values, hull, front, rear, same for turret and top armor. I also have Schuler special armor modifiers, BBE blown off. Most systems oversimplify the armor. They almost don't have a choice, Mark. I get your point, but a huge part of whether or not armor is effective is the angle that it hits at. And short of breaking out a protractor and trying to actually calculate the angle that the armor hits at is tough. So here, like here's an example. Let's say this BMP, make sure they can both see here. Let's just say this BMP was shooting at this BMP, although there's a lot more distance. Okay, it hits the front armor Oh, it's going to have a pretty piss poor value because it's hitting the frontal armor. Well, it's also hitting it at a 90-degree angle. So it's actually a pretty good shot, as opposed to this. All right, well, if you bisect the tank front corner to back corner, like games like 7 Days to the River Rhine and Battle Group dictate, this guy is in the flank. So he's hitting the flank armor. Yeah, but look at the angle that he's hitting that flank armor at. But what the game is going to do is count that as a flank shot and give you the flank bonus for that shot, even though it's clearly in a real life situation, that's not a good penetration angle, like at all. So I get it. I don't know. It's, yeah, to your point, most games definitely have to oversimplify the armor. Otherwise, it gets completely out of hand. Also, things like the tank armor, like wear. Okay, I'm hitting the front. Okay, wear on the front. Some games, like yours, Mark, I think does a great job of at least distinguishing between turret and hull frontal armor. But even there's going to be, and again, this is also the dice. The dice have to take over eventually. The dice, I feel, in most game designs, marks the dividing line where the game designer gives up. Like, did it hit under the engine, or did it hit under the gun mallet? Are we catching a shot trap? Did I hit one of those bricks of reactive armor, or did I get between the bricks? Did I hit the searchlight? Did I hit the... Dude, calm down. That's what the dice are for. If you get a really good roll, that's you clearly hit the shot trap. You got it right under the gun mantlet, and it penetrated, right under the coax machine gun, or something like that. Or did you roll poorly? Well, it hit like the glacis at a nice shallow angle, and it clearly just pinged off. Sooner or later, I feel the dice have to sort of take over. John says, "All right, folks, got to head out. Good night, all." I think I'll go ahead and agree with you there, John. I think it's time for us to go ahead and log off. We're not going to do too much more painting today. I'm just going to put some wash on these commanders, and that's not terribly fun to watch, to be honest. But we'll work on that for a while after the stream. But Madman says, "I started with Tractics, and that is about as opposed to Panzerlitz Panzerleader as you can get." I'm not familiar with Tractics. I don't know if that's a platoon level game, but there are a lot of other great platoon level games that sort of picked up the ball where Panzerblitz Panzerleader left off. Panzer Grenadier is probably the best example, followed by GDW Assault, which is great. It's just kind of complicated. GDW Assault is Panzerleader in the 1980s. A lot of people have tried to update Panzerleader, myself included, for the 1980s, 90s, and so on. Assault is Frank Chadwick sat down with a clean sheet of paper and he did it for real. He did it the right way. It's just not a terribly popular game because it is very, very, eat your Wheaties, son. Pack a lunch before you try that game. But I think it's a good time to go ahead and call it. We have now been up for, an hour and a half almost. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and call it, everyone. Cool. So thanks very much, everyone, for hanging out. I know today was scheduled for something else, but sometimes life gets in the way. I'm not sure if Bill is going to run his originally intended content next week or not. I don't want to speak for him. But either way, watch this space and see what we have coming up. I'm not sure what I'm doing next Sunday, the upcoming Sunday, for content. I might put up some of our Fallujah Force on Force if I can get that edited together in time. Or I'm going to do some Panzerleader for the 80th anniversary of the Battle of El Qatar. Frankly, I have to look up the anniversary of El Qatar. I think it's a little later in March. I think I have a few more weeks on that. But I've run that game before in Panzerleader. The scenario's already built, the counter's already built, the map's already drawn. We can probably run that, or at least part of it, on a Sunday stream. I keep saying we have to get back to our hex and counter stuff because that's a big part of the community that we have been kind of neglecting over the last couple, I was going to say weeks, but really months. So sooner or later we're going to get back to that. Oh no, my dog has been waiting for her walk, so I'll go now too. Finishing the Viet Minh and Viet Cong tonight. Awesome. Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and take off. Thanks very much everybody. This is Oriskany Jim with the Sitrep podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode here. Thanks very much everybody for coming out. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video and you're not already subscribed. In the meantime, this is Oriskany Jim, and as always, Tango Mike for listening. We'll be in touch, and thanks again.